Today, we'll be diving into what it takes to be a good leader and why not everyone is necessarily cut out for the job. To help us in our discussion, we have Sam Ducker. Sam is the People Experience Director at Xero for the UK and EMEA regions. He's previously worked in various human resource roles across a variety of industries, from retail to tech and the public sector. Cool. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be joined today by Sam Ducker. Hi, Sam. Thanks for joining.
No, thank you for having me. Hi, Jamie.
Yeah, very interesting episode and topic that we're going to be discussing today. Not everyone should be a leader. But before we jump into the nitty-gritty of today's conversation, Sam, would you mind giving the listeners or the viewers a bit of background and an intro to yourself, please?
Yeah, 100%. Well, thanks again for having me. So I'm Sam. I work for Xero here in the UK, and so I work as our People Experience Director, and I've been in People Experiences HR, I guess in a lot of other businesses. But we like to think we're a bit more modern than what a lot of people think of your typical HR department. So I've been with Xero for about 6 years, and been in the director role for a couple of years now. And really, my role is to lead a amazing team based here out of the UK who get involved in all things related to our people. So to summarize it, it's how do we have the right people in the right place at the right time to grow and develop their careers and make sure Xero is a place where everyone wants to come and work every day. So it's a pretty cool purpose in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Really interesting and challenging, I'm sure, on the best of days, but meaningful.
Yeah, for sure. It can be, but very rewarding at the same time.
Perfect. Let's dive into it. And I think, why this topic is so important for me is in my position as a team lead and from previous managerial positions I've held, I want to be the best leader to my team, right? And it's really important for myself that they feel like I'm someone that's reliable and someone that they can count on. But there are a few myths surrounding leadership, right? And there is this widespread misconception that just because you're good at your job means that you'll make for an incredible leader, but this is not all the case. And why do people, maybe in your opinion, Sam, is there this assumption that if you're a good worker, you'll be a good manager or good leader?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I do think it's important to call out from the start that oftentimes high performers will or can become great leaders. Whilst not every single high performing individual contributor, which I'm sure we'll come on to, is unlikely to become a people leader or should want to become a people leader. It's also on the flip side going to be very unlikely that you're going to have a low performer that also moves into a leadership role. So I think there's a bit of a balance there. Whilst when you move into a leadership role, you're not necessarily the technical expert anymore. You do have to have a level of technical capability to understand the role that your teams are doing. And you also have to build up a level of credibility and trust, I think, with your team as well. And so it can be hard to do that if you're equally a low performer in your current role. So I think there's a correlation between the two, but it should never be the sole reason that someone moves into a leadership role. But I think to answer your question, I think when we think about why do we have this assumption? I think there's a historical view that if someone's a good performer, they're going to be a good leader because it's the most visible and traditional way to reward high performance. And it's often looked at in the old kind of hierarchical sense of good performer means they can take on more responsibility. And that often meant leadership responsibilities. But I think what's often confused is technical mastery with leadership aptitude. And they're two very, very different things.
Yeah, agree completely. I think in a lot of people's minds might be this assumption that this is the logical next step in my career growth. You've mastered being an individual contributor, and now it's time for me to start leading a team, which, is honestly probably not the best path for that broad thinking. What are some instances where individual contributors might be excellent, but not the most effective leader?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what's important to call out from the start is none of the conversation we're about to have should deter anyone from thinking, is leadership really for me? Should I be put off now because I'm high performing? Should that mean I don't look at leadership? Because I think moving into leadership is a journey and should always be seen as a journey, not a step up in rank because you've been performing for so long. And like 100% leadership skills can be taught, can be learned, and can be developed. And many top performers will no doubt be great leaders. And I strongly challenge the idea that you either, have it or you don't, or like you're born a leader and that's it. It's a very fixed mindset to have. Like no leader is perfect in my mind. Everyone's going to have strengths that they can really lean into, but they're also going to have development areas as well. But I think the main reason it doesn't always work out is because the core focus of the roles are just completely different. I've said to many people in the past that leadership is almost like stepping into a whole different career change. Like an individual contributor's success comes from their own work and expertise, and you have direct ownership over your own performance and success. Whereas a leader's success comes from enabling and empowering the work of others. And they're two very, very different things and require different skill sets. It's the shift of being the doer to the coach. And so a star individual contributor may get all their satisfaction from solving the problems themselves, whereas a great leader will get satisfaction from watching their team solve the problems and knowing that they've had an impact in supporting their growth and development along the way. As I think, as an example, if I've got a bit of time, I think I'm a big fan of all of the Patrick Lencioni work. If anyone's not familiar, I'd strongly recommend his work. But he speaks to how leadership requires building vulnerability-based trust, which is a skill that's completely different and separate from coding or selling or accounting, for example. Leadership is all about people and helping them to reach their potential. So like building and developing these soft skills, if you like, is key and absolutely critical to moving into leadership, which often isn't as either high in the pecking order for certain individual contributor roles, or they just show up very differently. You're often not needing to lead and motivate and develop other teams. Sometimes you are, but it can show up slightly differently.
Love what you said earlier, Sam, about, the fact that yes, or strong leaders are often born with that innate leadership characteristic, but it's not to say that leaders can't be trained. And I think it's complementary, right? You could have a person that has those innate leadership skills, but could also benefit from further enhancing those skills with a bit of training and supplementing that. So it's always really interesting for me. I can spot someone who in my team specifically would make for an awesome leader down the line just because of the person that they are, right? But could benefit from training just to emphasize those leadership characteristics. So really agree with
100%. I think the one thing that you can't teach, no matter how much training or learning interventions you put in place, is the will to want to do it. I think that just comes from your own personality, your own personal preferences, where you get your energy from. Everything else, in my mind, can be taught and can be learned. It requires a growth mindset. You have to feel like you don't have a ceiling. Like before I moved into a leadership role or was early in my career, I would never have thought in a million years I'll be doing some of the things that I'm doing now. You just don't when you're around your career, right? It feels like a million miles away, but it's like building a technical skill set. It just takes practice, takes learning, it takes failing at times as well.
getting it wrong 100%.
Yeah, getting it wrong, yeah, 100%, which everyone will. Like there won't be anyone in a leadership role that hasn't made mistakes. It's what you do after those mistakes and being self-aware enough to realize when you've made a mistake and then wanting to make a change to it.
Yeah, agreed. Do you have a personal story that you'd feel open to sharing with us?
Around moving into leadership. Look, I think so. If I use an example for me, I think before before I moved into leadership, I think I always knew that I wanted to move into a leadership role. Like I've always naturally been that person when I was in a team but not leading the team who would want to support a new starter coming in and help them get up to speed, or coach another team member where I feel like I've got some value that I can add. And I always knew that the reward that I got from that was um, often more than getting the praise for doing something myself. And so I always think I've always wanted to move into a leadership role. Um, but I too had times where I'm like, I don't know exactly what I need to do to be a good leader. Like, but where I always came back to, and it's just a really practical thing to think about, is I would always just think back to who were the people that I really liked reporting into, who were the managers that I really liked. And when you really start to think about it from your own development, think about what were the traits and characteristics that they displayed that you would want to demonstrate in return. On the flip side to that, and whilst it might not have been very positive at the time, I think you almost learn more from your bad leaders, or maybe those where you had challenging relationships, because then you know exactly what not to do. So yeah, that's kind of my journey into leadership, was really thinking about my own experiences, what I went through, because then it's a lot easier to translate that into how you can make other people feel.
I completely agree. And I must say, in my professional career, I've definitely experienced a few choice managers, and that helped me decide who I didn't want to emulate in terms of the manager that I one day become, right? And I also completely agree with you. You derive more fulfillment or enjoyment out of that winning through others than taking praise for the job done for your own merits or on your own account.
Yeah, 100%.
This podcast is brought to you by Sift Analytics. Sift Analytics is an interactive and collaborative financial reporting tool that helps you generate beautiful reports, forecasts, and consolidations in just a few clicks. Sift helps you increase revenue, reduce costs, save time, and look professional. It is also enhanced by AI-powered insights that help you go from data to decisions in no time. Want to find out more? Visit our website at siftanalytics.com to start a 14-day free trial today.
Talking about the individual contributor versus the people leader or the manager, what would you say the difference between excelling in a role is versus excelling at leading others?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think excelling in an individual contributor role for me is all about mastering a specific craft. And that could be going very technical, deep technical knowledge and expertise in the area that you're working in. Like you might be the go-to person for answers. You might be the technical expert, the doer, the problem solver, like role models, all the behaviors and skill sets that you need for delivering a like great impact and outcomes. And it should be said, like individual contributors, businesses would fail without having a ton of individual contributors that are making a huge impact and doing great work across a business. And so the difference of that to moving into a leadership role for me is it becomes about excelling at leading is about the mastery of people. So you are the go-to person for support, for clarity, for creating a vision that motivates your team or teams. You're great at removing obstacles and providing support, and many of the things that we could get into. But as you can see, it kind of moves away a little bit from having technical knowledge and expertise, but actually how do you really help and support your team to do their best work? And how do you create an environment and a culture within your team where people feel heard, feel valued, feel respected, feel like there's high trust. And it's a very different skill set. So this view of, oh, this person's done this role for so long, let's just promote them to a leadership role. Well, have you actually assessed that they've got any of these other skill sets that are going to be needed for moving into that role? And I think it happens more so now, but you'll definitely have situations where it doesn't happen enough, or move, and it's the wrong thing to do, but moving into leadership can be we don't know how else to reward them or to progress them, so let's just give them it because they've been here for X amount of time and they deserve it because they've been performing well. But the reality is you could be setting them up to fail, or actually putting them in a role that they don't really want to do if you really poach them on it.
Yeah. And also running the risk of making their potential subordinates really unhappy too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think it's a really good point. Like when you promote someone from an individual contributor to a leader, you're essentially creating two bigger challenges. One, you've just lost probably one of your best performers in their IC capacity, but then you've also put potentially not the most effective leader into now leading a team, which then has a ripple effect onto other people's experience in your company. And so what you then get from that is potential impacts to things like team morale, engagement, productivity, and ultimately like could have a broader business impact. Now, if your team aren't productive, they might not be delivering the best experience for your customers, can have an impact on the bottom line. You may also then find that you've got retention issues. You've got a load of people in that team that have decided to leave. That then has a cost impact because you've got to recruit other people. That costs money. Got to train them up to get them up to the standard that they were at before. That costs time and money. And so it's not just a quick fix that you can just turn around if it doesn't work out. It has massive ripple effects and huge business impacts. Can make wrong leadership hiring decisions. And in some ways more than if you were to hire the wrong individual contributor, because the impact can somewhat be limited. When you're hiring a leadership role that leads other people, the impact can be far greater.
Yeah, agreed. So what would your recommendation be to business owners, accounting practices, bookkeepers, if they were to consider promoting someone into a leadership role, versus, is this person maybe not suited for a leadership role? How can I support them in growing in other ways?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I know it's a challenge that a lot of businesses can come up against. And so I think the biggest sign for me is to look for the individual contributors who are essentially already acting as leaders. And so I'm strongly of the opinion that you don't have to be have a leadership title to demonstrate leadership capabilities. So like, who are the people in your team who are already mentoring and coaching peers or junior members of the team? Who do people naturally just turn to for advice? Who takes initiative in role modeling the right behaviors and proactively calls out like behaviors that don't align with your values? They're the things that I'd really be looking out for. And then you also want to be assessing their motive. What's their motivation behind wanting to move into a role? Are they driven by a genuine desire to see others succeed, or are they motivated by the status and the potential pay rise that comes with the job title, which isn't realistically the reason you should be looking to go into leadership? But I guess the alternative to that is for those that don't want to move into leadership roles, and that is absolutely fine. And nobody should have to want to move into a leadership role, and it's not going to be for everyone. Where people get their purpose and what fills people's buckets is going to come from different things. And so for those that don't, I think it's for their leaders to make really clear that you're not failing if you're not wanting to move into a leadership role. Like this doesn't have to be your ceiling. And so what are the other career progression pathways outside of leadership that their leader could help them explore, which they might not have thought of themselves? I do think even in modern businesses, I do still think there's a bit of a perception of, I have to go into leadership if I want to get senior enough. But it's just not the case. There are tons of senior individual contributor roles out there, and it may be difficult for some organizations, depending on the size of your business, to be able to do that. No, because I also don't agree with the idea of creating a role for creating a role's sake. That's not optimal for the business. But are there ways within your business or opportunities to stretch somebody's existing role. And I don't think you should be asking them to do that for nothing in return. Like, I still think you should look at whether pay should be impacted by that, whether the scope of their impact should be changed by that. But trying to find opportunities for other individual contributor pathways for people to develop into, or they might already naturally be stepping into that, but recognizing that more formally.
Yeah. I love the suggestion of identifying those individual contributors who are already performing at that level, because that allows you, as a people leader, to quickly identify who are those individual contributors that would really excel in the roles. That's really great advice. I think maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe a perception with especially first time people leader to bees, there is this misconception about what the role would entail. And I think that stems back to the difference between being a manager and a people leader. A manager for me, in my mind, is strongly focused on output and getting the job done and delegating. But true leadership is about so much more. It's about building that trust within your team. It's about taking accountability for when things go awry, and then celebrating the wins of the team and letting them have the victory when things go really well. It's about coaching. It's about mentoring. It's about so much more than just, oh, fantastic, I'm going to have 3 subordinates that, I'm going to get to boss around on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, 100%. I completely agree. And I think this is where it can be difficult if you've not been in a people leadership role yet and you're looking to move into one. I always think best practice for me is get some experience in understanding what will be involved in that leadership role before you actually move into that leadership role. And there's lots of different ways that you can do that as well. Like you can do some of this proactively yourself, or people should be speaking to their people leader, and their people leader should be having development conversation with themselves and asking for some of these opportunities. So there's some really tactical and simple things that you can do around, do you take ownership of leading some of your team meetings on behalf of your manager? Do you coach and mentor junior team members or new starters that are coming on board? Or do you take on additional responsibility? Like it might be leading a certain project or getting involved in a more strategic piece of work. Like there's lots of things that people can do without having to take the step into leadership at first. And I was coaching somebody on this a few years ago who was looking to go into a leadership role. And it was the same kind of thing. Felt like they'd in a sales role, felt like they'd hit their ceiling, if you like, in their individual contributor capacity, wanted to move into leadership because it felt like the obvious next step. And it's like, so I was having a conversation with him because we were talking about his personal development plan, and it's, what are your motives first and foremost for wanting to get into leadership? Because what drives you in your individual contributor role is almost going to have to be the opposite in your leadership capacity. In sales, you're running after your own target. You get the praise when you hit them. You get the pat on the back, that kind of thing. You get a lot of fulfillment out of that. But when you move into leadership, you're passing that praise on to somebody else, and you then don't become the focal point, if you like. You're there to make your team the best that they can then be. So is that really what you want to do, or do you just think that's what you want to do? And so like this guy, he did end up going into a leadership role, but not as quickly as he first thought he was going to. So he took the time to actually take hold some of that additional responsibility first, to essentially test, does this make me happier leading my team, or does it make me happier when I hit my own target? And I think that's the main thing that people need to work out, is what gives me the most joy and fulfillment in my role. Is it helping others, or is it wanting to be in control of my own role? And there's nothing wrong with either, by the way. And like both fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, really important as the people leader to that staff member who has expressed an interest in, wanting additional responsibilities, to then check in and a monthly catch up, or whenever or however often it's happening, to say, was it something that you actually enjoyed, or oh, actually, it's not for me. Okay, great. How can I support you in growing in other ways, right?
Yeah.
And that's really important to continue that conversation. It's not, okay, well, we don't think you'll be suitable or you wouldn't enjoy it. So, that's kind of where it ends there. But Sam, back to what you were saying earlier about the perceived stigma of why just being an expert or a specialist or that just element, is what you have to say about that stigma that still looms with just being an individual contributor.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the piece around the stigma, I think for me, the stigma comes from companies historically have only offered a single vertical ladder for perceived success. So to be seen as advancing in your career, you had to manage people. That was the old school way of thinking about it. And I think what we need to build and celebrate is parallel, equally prestigious paths for deep technical expertise as well. So, and as I said before, that's not possible in every company. And as I said, we shouldn't create roles for roles' sake if they aren't needed. But equally, somebody wanting to remain in an individual contributor role should never be seen as a negative. As I said, you can still have an incredibly rewarding and meaningful career without directly managing people and have a huge impact in your company. Like companies would clearly fall apart if you didn't have individual contributors. Like your ICs, like your doers, they're getting a lot of the work done. Obviously, in many leadership roles as well, you often get player coach type roles where you're doing still a lot of the work, but you're also leading teams to distribute some of that work as well. So it's not as black and white as that, but ICs are needed for a business to be successful. I think moving the risk is when you move into leadership, when you know that it's not for you, is you're only going to make yourself far more miserable and disengaged in your job than you ever probably thought you would. And that's not good for anyone. It's not good for you, for your team, for the business, for your own happiness and sense of purpose in a job. And I think for those that move into it for the job title or for the increased pay, the pay, you very quickly will get used to that, and it won't mean anything when you're turning up to work for 40 plus hours a week unhappy. You would
Trading it.
do anyway.
Waking up on a Monday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when you get the Sunday scaries, yeah, that additional pay, whatever that might be, isn't gonna go very far. So no, I absolutely, there should not be a stigma around leadership versus IC, and I think that is moving away in many cases. I think some industries it's still more prevalent than others, but yeah, it 100% shouldn't be seen as the only pathway to pass your career as a success by the time you retire.
Yeah. The novelty quickly wears off.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's chat very quickly about some of the key traits or skills that make for an awesome leader. If you had to name 5, what would they be, Sam?
Oh, that's a great question.
Putting
As you got told a specific number, it's hard to think. As I said before, I don't think there's many things when it comes to leadership that is innate and part of you. I think, as I said before, you have to want to be responsible for the growth and success of others. I think that's hard to teach somebody if it's not naturally what you want to do. But I think the skill can 100% be taught. And so this is where, for me, you have to have a growth mindset. And so what I mean by that is, for any of your listeners that aren't familiar with the term, is you have to believe that your current level of capability isn't your ceiling, and that you can, with time, effort, dedication, and some curiosity, can certainly grow and develop your skill set. And so leadership isn't a fixed trait that you're born with. It's really a collection of, like, observable, what you see from your previous leaders or peers, etc., and then teachable skills. So I think there's so many skills that you could go into when you're thinking about leadership. I think big ones for me are empathy,
Yeah.
vulnerability, like active listening, the ability to give clear feedback, and being able to build that absolute foundation of trust and psychological safety. They're all behaviors and skills and traits that can be developed and practiced. Like, not everyone's born with naturally a ton of empathy, but you can learn to develop empathy. You have to understand what it is, how to put yourself in other people's shoes, but you have to want to be able to learn that and understand why that makes you a better leader. So I don't know if that was followed, but they're the ones that come to mind, and are the common themes that have come up when I've looked at what makes a people leader really great.
Yeah, and to your point from earlier, it takes a lot of practice, right? So no one's going to get it right on the first go, but it's having that learning mindset, having that emotional intelligence, having that empathy, to be reflective and to say, what could I have done better in this specific instance, or where did I fall short, or so it's an ongoing journey, I think.
Yeah, I think if you think about, like, the first time you have to give somebody constructive feedback or have to have a really difficult conversation, I don't think anybody moving into their first leadership role has ever woken up and thought, oh, I can't wait, I've got to give somebody this really hard feedback today. But the more you do it, it's like training a muscle in the gym. You put the reps in, it gets easier, right? You build the muscle of being able to give feedback, and you hone in on your way of delivering the feedback in a clear and concise way, and learn from any mistakes you make along the way. So everything can be developed, but sometimes you have to throw yourself in and challenge yourself to do it, because there's a lot of aspects of leadership that aren't easy. When you're dealing with people, it's often not an easy role.
Yeah, growing the uncomfortability, right?
100%. Yeah.
Time has just flown, Sam. I can't believe it. We could spend probably the next hour or so chatting about the topic, but maybe just to close us off, our typical rapid fire questions. What's one piece of software that you can't live without, and you're not allowed to say Sift or Xero?
Yeah, fair enough. Asana for me. So we use Asana, that any kind of project tracking tool, I use it for my projects, I use it for my to-do lists, and I'd be lost without it.
What about an app on your phone?
An app on my phone? Spotify.
Yep, agree on.
Can't get through a gym session without some good music.
What's the best book you've read lately, or a podcast that you're really into?
So with a 10-month-old at home, no books of late. Struggling to find one for that right now. But one book recommendation I'll give, because it's linked to the topic that we're talking about, would strongly recommend Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. Another load of these points around what makes a great leader. Has got so many useful little nuggets of information in there. So really, really recommend that.
I'm going to check that one out. Thank you for the recommendation. And last question, if you would like the listeners or viewers to take away one point from today's podcast, what would it be?
I think, taking it really back to basics, it's just that there's no right or wrong path to take to have a successful career. And that's ultimately for you to decide. And only you will know what really gives you energy, what gives you a sense of reward and purpose. And so when you figure out what that is, do that. And whether that's leadership or not leadership, either are absolutely fine. But whatever you decide to do, or whatever path you decide to take, then challenge yourself to master whatever it is that you want to do.
Fantastic. Simon Ducker, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, not at all. Thank you. Thanks for your time, Gary.
Have a good one. Chat soon. Cheers.
Did you say it? Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Beyond Insights podcast. Please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to right now. And please share with any of your colleagues or friends or family members that you think might benefit from listening to this podcast. That's all from us. Until next time, see you then.